Yuggles by Paul Jennings. See, no one had ever seen a Yuggle before, and no one's ever seen one since. Where they came from and how they exploded has never been explained. Anyway, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. I'd better start at the beginning. This boy called Pockets was visiting his little sister Midge in hospital. Pockets called in every day to try and cheer her up. Poor little kid, she was really sick. Mostly she just lay with her head on the pillow looking at you sadly with those big brown eyes. It was pretty hard getting a smile out of her. The prize is an Easter egg, said Pockets. The biggest bloomin' Easter egg in the world. He stretched out his hands like a fisherman telling lies about his latest catch. It's covered in little chocolate angels, he went on. Hundreds of them. Something unusual happened when Pockets said this. Midge smiled. Only a little smile, filled with pain, but a smile all the same. I'd sure to see those angels. Well, this was enough for Pockets. If you want that egg, Midge, he said, me and Cactus will get it for you. Pockets' mate Cactus stood at the edge of the bed. He smiled back at Midge, but inside he wasn't smiling. He was wondering how they were going to keep Pockets' promise. How are we going to win that egg? Said Cactus as they walked home from the hospital. Now you've gone and got our hopes up. What if we don't come first? There's only one prize. We will win, said Pockets. All we have to do is collect more mushrooms than anyone else. But everyone else wants to win too, said Cactus. Whole school is after that Easter egg. Everyone will be searching. No one wants to win more than us, said Pockets. We'll search all day, and we'll search all night. That way we're sure to find the most. All night, yelled Cactus. My dad won't let me out all night, nor will yours. What they don't know won't hurt him, said Pockets. He was like that, was Pockets. Didn't care what happened if it was something for poor little Midge. Well, Pockets and Cactus searched all day for mushrooms. They found plenty. They trudged through the paddocks in the pouring rain. They walked and walked till their feet grew blisters as big as eggs. Their bag of mushrooms was so heavy they could barely carry it. And they kept going, on, bending and picking, searching, running over to each new clump of mushrooms as if it might vanish before they got there. Just before tea, they saw something bad. In the next paddock was Smatter, the school bully. He and his mate Johnson were looking for mushrooms too. They carried a huge sack of mushrooms. Oh no, said Pockets. Look at that. They've nearly got as many as us. And that's how it was that Pockets Cactus came to be out in the paddocks at night, in the dripping rain. Was their only chance to make sure they found more mushrooms than Smatter and Johnson. In the feeble light of their torches they stumbled through the grass, every now and then finding a sodden but precious mushroom. The sack grew heavier and heavier. Let's leave it here for a while, said Pockets. We can come back and get it later. He dumped the precious sack down under a dark tree. Two boys set off carrying only a small bucket. They didn't notice another torch flashing between the bushes, nor did they know that more than mushrooms were growing in the cold, wet night. Luck was against them. Cactus and Pockets searched and stumbled through the wet grass, but they found nothing, not a single mushroom, not as much as the smell of one. It's okay, said Pockets wearily. We've got enough already. Smatter can never get as many as us now. Can't wait to see the look in Midge's eyes when she sees that Easter egg. Let's get the sack and go home. With scorching feet, they made their way back to the tree. Where's the sack? Grumbled Cactus. His dying torch beam searched the wet grass. It wasn't there. Is this the right tree? Said Pockets. His voice shook as he spoke. Cactus shone the torch up into the branches. There it is, he yelled. Someone's thrown it up into the tree. Give me a lift. Cactus scrambled up the wet gum tree. Dripping leaves mopped his face. Water trickled down his back. Suddenly Cactus slipped. He slithered down, scraping the skin off his knee. He swung for a moment from a bucking branch. Then slowly, painfully, he hooked one leg over the branch, dragged himself up. He climbed carefully to where the sack dangled from a fork in the branches. Cactus just managed to hook the sack with one finger and pull it towards him. It came away easily, lightly. He peered into the sack, gasped. There was only one little mushroom in the sack. Otherwise, it was empty. They're gone, he shouted, down through the branches. Someone's nicked them, yelled Pockets. Rage choked his words. They'd worked all day and all night for nothing. Now Midge would never get that giant chocolate Easter egg. The thought of his little sister lying in hospital was too much for Pockets. He punched the tree with his fist and skinned his knuckles. Blood ran down his fingers. He wiped his eyes with a knuckle, made the tears on his cheek turn red. Far off, along a ridge of darkness, 2 torches twinkled beneath the trees. "After them!" yelled Cactus. "We can catch them on the road!" The 2 friends charged into the night. They plunged across a small creek and headed up the hill to the road just in time. 2 large figures loomed out of the shadows. They carried an enormous sack. Pockets and Cactus could smell freshly picked mushrooms. "Drop those mushrooms!" yelled Pockets. "You pinched them out of our sack." Smatter and his offsider stopped and peered at their enemies. They were the biggest kids in school. They were tough, real tough. "Prove it," said Smatter. "These are ours. We picked every one ourselves." He bunched up his fist. Pockets wanted to fight them. He felt anger growing in his throat, but he knew it was useless. They were just too big. There was no way he and Cactus could beat the bullies. Smatter knew that he'd won. He laughed cruelly. "Wimps," he chortled as he headed off into the night. By now the rain had stopped, and the sun was rising over the bush. Kookaburra laughed, but Pockets and Cactus didn't join in. "It's hopeless," said Cactus. "Even if we could find more mushrooms, it's too late. Competition ends at 10 o'clock. It's just not enough time." Pockets didn't answer. He was thinking about little Midge. Poor kid. She'd been in hospital most of her life. If you could call it a life. She'd hardly ever asked for anything, and now he couldn't even get the one thing that she did want. It wasn't as if he could go off and buy another one. And anyway, he didn't have any money. Pockets stared at the ground. Cactus made a despairing search for mushrooms. "Oh, give up," said Pockets. It's too late." Cactus didn't reply. He was peering at something on the ground. "Look at this," he yelled. "Whopping big mushrooms." "Oh, they're brown," said Pockets. "They're no good. They're toadstools. Probably poisonous. Don't touch them." "I'm taking them anyway," said Cactus. "They might be valuable." He dropped the 3 toadstools into the sack. "Wonder what they're called," he said. "Yuggles," said Pockets. Pockets was always making up names for things. It's just a strange habit he had. "Okay," said Cactus. "Yuggles it is." "It's getting light," said Pockets. "We better get home before our parents wake up. I'll meet you at 8:30 at my place." They ran off in different directions. Pockets took the sack with him. Inside, the Yuggles jiggled, quietly. Didn't make a sound. Pockets sneaked home to bed. After a bit, he got up and had breakfast. Then he met Cactus at the gate. They walked to school together. "What did you bring them for?" said Cactus, pointing to the sack. Pockets took out one of the brown toadstools, gave it a sniff. "Ugh, it smells awful," he said. "Yuck!" They stopped outside a shop. It was Took's real estate agency. On the window, someone had sprayed brown graffiti. It said, "Took is a rooker." Suddenly, the door of the shop burst open. Mr. Took rushed out and grabbed Pockets by the scruff of the neck. "Gotcha!" he screamed. "You little devil! I'll teach you to write on my window." "I didn't," babbled Pockets. "Don't give me that," yelled Took. His eyes bugged out of his head like jelly marbles. "Look at your fingers. They're covered in brown paint." Pockets stared at his hands. They were brown. "It's the toadstool," he said, holding it up in front of Took's face. "It's not paint, it's a toadstool." Took was furious. He smacked the toadstool out of Pockets' hands, bounced across the footpath, and stopped near a rubbish bin. "It's true," said Cactus. He walked towards the Yuggle. Then he stopped. Something was happening. The toadstool moved. It wobbled. Then it began to take a strange shape. Changed. It grew and lost its toadstool shape, and it turned into a large brown blob, like a lump of clay. And then, just as if it was being formed by invisible hands, it changed into a rubbish bin. It turned into a bin, exactly the same as the one on the footpath. It even had the same broken handle and a large dent on the side. Twin bins, standing silently together. Took screamed. He rubbed his eyes. He blubbered and blabbered. "What? How? Quick! Help! Run! No!" He seemed to want to run, but like Pockets and Cactus, he couldn't tear himself away. The next bit is hard to believe, but it really happened. The new bin seemed to have a problem. It's hard to explain. Sort of like it was holding its breath, as if it was going to explode with the effort of staying together. Nothing happened for about 2 or 3 minutes. The bin just kind of stood there. Perhaps it gave a wobble, but mostly it just put all its effort into staying into bin shape. Mr. Took took a step forward. Carefully, mind you. Not in a brave way, but like someone who sees $100 note in a snake's mouth. He just had to get a bit closer. Then it happened. The new bin gave 3 little squeaks and then erupted like a volcano. It bubbled and burst into a horrible brown sludge, a mountain of muck. It was putrid. Took screamed and fell back onto the footpath. Cactus and Pocket stared in horror. Cactus yelled. Pockets bellowed. The revolting brown goo blistered and plopped like a hot mud pool. "Oh, disgusting," gasped Cactus. "It looks like brown vomit." "Foul," said Pockets. Mr. Took crawled back into his shop and locked the door. The 2 boys were alone with a pile of rotting brown gunk. "What is it?" groaned Cactus. He stared at the horrible lumps that festered and swam in the remains of the melted bin. Pocket scratched his head. "It's Bromets," he said. "We'll call it Bromet." Mr. Took burst out of his door carrying a broom and shovel. He stared nervously at the Bromet. He didn't want to get too close. He shouted angrily, "You two, clean that stuff." He never finished the sentence. Pockets and Cactus were already running down the street as fast as they could go. The sack with the mushroom and the last 2 Yuggles on the bottom bumped against Pockets' knee. Finally, they stopped at the corner. They puffed and panted. Cactus had a pain in his side. Pocket stared nervously behind him. "There's no one there," he gasped. "We're safe." "I can't believe what happened," said Cactus. "That Yuggle just turned into a bin." "Then it squeaked 3 times," said Pockets. "And melted into brown vomit," added Cactus. "You mean Bromet," said Pockets. They grinned at each other, but not for long. "Get them!" screeched a voice. "Get them, boy!" A fierce growl made them turn. An enormous dog snarled and salivated. It snapped at their ankles with teeth like steel. Its red eyes bulged with hate. It darted in and out, looking for a chance to tear and rip at their unprotected legs. "Go, boy! Get him! Get him!" shouted a woman from behind a hedge. Pockets looked at the woman. Her eyes were as fierce and angry as the dog's. "Told you not to stand on my grass," she shrieked. "Go, bandit, go!" Pockets and Cactus wanted to turn and run, but they were too scared. "Keep your eyes on him," whispered Cactus. "Don't move." The dog's growl grew even more terrible. It pulled back its lips like a curtain to reveal green and jagged teeth. It circled, waiting for its chance. Pockets looked for a weapon, a stick, a stone, anything, but the grass was bare. Without really knowing why, he put his hand in the sack, pulled out a Yuggle. He felt a tingle in his fingers, a small vibration, a sort of frightened quiver. He threw the Yuggle at Bandit. It hit the dog on the head and dropped into the nature strip. The dog renewed its attack, barking and lunging forward. Then it stopped and sniffed. The Yuggle had begun to grow. It bubbled and fizzled like brown soap suds pouring out of a washing machine. Then it began to take shape. A bulge formed at one end. 4 muddy stick legs grew out underneath it. It sprouted fur. The Yuggle turned into a dog, a frozen copy of the savage animal that snapped and snarled around it. Not a live dog, more like a stuffed dog, a replica of Bandit. It had fur, it had red swollen eyes, and its mouth was pulled back in a solid snarl. But it wasn't alive. It was only a statue, of sorts. Bandit growled and circled the new dog. It sniffed and snuffed. The woman peered over the fence in terrified silence. Pockets gave a nervous smile and stepped back. Cactus followed him. Time seemed to stand still. The minutes ticked by. Nothing moved except Bandit, who darted in and out, snapping at its silent twin. The Yuggle dog quivered, just for a second. It gave a tense little shiver. Then it squeaked 3 times. "Oh no," yelled Pockets. "It's going to collapse." He moved back. Bandit moved closer. The copy of Bandit couldn't keep it up. The bulge like a boil grew on its head. It suddenly erupted, and a brown river of Bromet poured out. Bandit grabbed the decaying dog in its teeth. The Yuggle dog burst and melted into brown stinking mess on the grass. Bandit's nose was covered in it. The poor animal yelped and wiped at its snout. It rolled over on the grass, rubbing its mouth on the ground in a pitiful effort to remove the smell. Then it gave a yelp and a squeal and raced down the street at an enormous speed. The woman took one last horrified look at Brommet, and as she ran after her dog, "Bandit!" she called. "Bandit, come back!" Pockets and Cactus ran too. They didn't stop until they reached the school gate. They didn't even notice the kids milling around the gym, waiting for the mushroom way in. "Boy," said Pockets, "these Yuggles are dangerous." "Maybe we should get rid of it," said Cactus slowly. Pockets peered into the bag at the last Yuggle, and the one lonely mushroom next to it. "Nah," he said. "It might be useful. We can still win that Easter egg, if we use our brains." "How?" asked Cactus. "This Yuggle might help," said Pockets. He reached into the bag and pulled out the last Yuggle, held it up and stared at it. Then he reached down, took out the little mushroom. "Go on," he said to the Yuggle. "Change." He rubbed the Yuggle and the mushroom together. Nothing happened. Something's missing," said Cactus slowly. "It's not going to change. You know what? I think it only changes when someone mean is around. Maybe it's scared. Mr. Took was real mean. And so was that lady, and the dog. The Yuggle only changes if someone nasty is around." Pockets was desperate. He thought of poor little Midge in hospital. He thought of that enormous Easter egg covered in chocolate angels. He thought of the bag of mushrooms that had been stolen. The prize should have been his. He watched sadly as kids walked into the gym carrying bags of mushrooms. None had a big as bag as the one that had been stolen. None except Smatter, that is. Smatter and Johnson staggered up to the door, carrying an enormous sack between them. They sneered at Pockets and his little mushroom and toadstool. Then they disappeared inside. "That's it," yelled Pockets. "I can't take any more of this." He was trying not to cry. "What are you going to do?" asked Cactus in a worried voice. "I'm going in," said Pockets, "with the last Yuggle. If it won't do its thing, well, "You'll what?" said Cactus. "I'll nick the Easter egg." "Steal it?" yelled Cactus. "Yeah," answered Pockets. "It's in a fridge out the back. I'll take it and escape out the back door. Everyone will be too busy watching the way in. No one will know." "You can't," said Cactus. "That would be stealing." "No, it won't," said Pockets. "It should be mine. We had the most mushrooms. Smatter stole them." Without another word, Pockets rushed into the hall. "Well, I'm not coming," shouted Cactus. "Not if you're going to steal it." Cactus stood there, looking at the gym and listening to the shouts and cheers coming from inside. He felt sorry for Midge, but stealing the egg wasn't the answer. Minutes ticked by. Half an hour passed. Cactus waited, worried. Suddenly, an enormous chair went up inside the hall. Cactus wondered what had happened. It didn't take long to find out. Smatter had won the competition. He burst out of the door, followed by dozens of cheering kids. He held the enormous Easter egg high above his head like a trophy. Then he spotted Cactus standing there looking at his boots. Smatter smirked. "Suffer," he yelled at Cactus. Cactus felt the anger boiling inside him, but he didn't say anything. Not a word. Smatter came over. He broke a chocolate angel off the egg and ate it. He stuffed it into his mouth. Then he started eating the egg in front of everybody. "Pig," said Cactus. "You think I'm a pig," said Smatter. "Just watch this then." Then he broke off enormous chunks of chocolate and stuffed them into his mouth. No one had ever eaten so fast, or so greedily. Cactus felt his heart sink inside him. He thought of grabbing the remains of the egg and running for it. But it wouldn't be any good now. Little Midge wouldn't want a half-eaten egg. Anyway, all the chocolate angels had already disappeared down Smatter's gullet. Cactus took a step forward. He couldn't control himself. He wanted to punch Smatter on the nose, but before he could move, he noticed something. It was Pockets. He was waving through the gym window, making signals and shaking his head. Cactus stopped and watched as Smatter scoffed down the whole egg. What a guts! No one else had even got a taste. Smatter looked around at the crowd of kids outside the gym. They couldn't believe that anyone could scoff so much chocolate in so short a time. Just as Smatter was wiping the last traces of his lips, Pockets burst out of the door. He was carrying another Easter egg. It was exactly the same as the one Smatter had just eaten. Even the little angels were identical. Cactus couldn't take it in. He tried to work out what was going on. The Yuggle must have copied itself into an Easter egg. Pockets was carrying it. "Drop it!" screamed Cactus. "Run for it!" Pockets just smiled. He wasn't scared at all. Smatter stared at the egg in Pocket's hands. His mouth fell open. He didn't say anything. Not a word. He just stood there, sort of quivering, and then something strange happened. He gave 3 little squeaks, or, to be exact, 3 little squeaks came out of his mouth. Cactus stared at Pockets, pointed at Smatter with the question on his face. Pockets nodded. "He's eaten the Yuggle," he yelled. Well, it was horrible. Just horrible. You wouldn't want me to tell you how that brommet came pouring out of Smatter's mouth. And you really wouldn't want to know how everyone screamed and jumped back from the foul flow. It was all too terrible to tell. But you probably won't be surprised to hear that Smatter didn't want the real Easter egg. Neither did anyone else, except Pockets. It was something to see when he took it to the hospital. Little Midge's face lit up. She had the biggest smile. She just couldn't believe it when Pockets walked in the door with that egg all covered in chocolate angels.